The Amber Alert Podcast.
Welcome, Amber Alert Podcast, episode 95, part 2. I am your host, Amber Starkey. It is a great day to be alive. Some of you may have been with me in part 1, which is great. That was the news portion. I dipped into ever so slightly what we're going to talk about in part 2. We're going to talk about UFO disclosure, which I believe is imminent. I honestly would be shocked if there is not an announcement made this year about UFOs, something to the I don't know, something to the effect of, we're not alone in the universe. We're going to confirm that aliens are real. And that explains why you've seen all these UFOs. That explains, for those of you who've been abducted, actually, I wouldn't necessarily expect them to get into the abductions, because the abductions are awful. People are taken against their will, many of which are kids at the time. And everybody ends up on a metal table. They do experiments to their bodies. So they implant them without their permission. So it's not a good thing. I don't really think that you could paint the abductions in a positive light. However, there is a whole narrative that, aliens are real and they are just our benevolent space brothers. And now, the reason they've been showing up, but like halfway hiding, is because they've been checking on us. They are our predecessors. They actually seeded planet Earth, and we are their, creation or whatever. And they've come back to check on us. And now we're on the brink of destroying our planet. We're on the brink of nuclear war, or maybe a nuke has already gone off. And so here they show up to help to rescue humanity. And so, the Stargate movie gets into that. There's like an alien that comes to Earth and he's like, well, I created you guys. So it's already been pushed with predictive programming into entertainment. And I believe there will be a lie that will be, here's the thing. I believe UFO disclosure is coming, but you can guarantee that you're not going to be told the truth. You can guarantee it. You're going to be told it's a managed agenda. You're going to be told the narrative they want you to accept. And if this is to line up with, I don't even know if I have time to go down that rabbit trail. I'll just say this, because I don't want to cut into what I want to talk about when I get into Turkey and Bible prophecy and Islam and everything. But let's just, for a minute, consider the fact that the Antichrist is going to establish a one world religion, right? If this figure rises to power, and I don't think the church is going to be here for any of this. So when I talk about this stuff, I'm not coming from a position of fear. I'm not afraid, even if I am still here somehow. I know how it's going to play out. I know that he who is in me is greater than he who's in the world. So this is not a position of fear. This is I'm trying to be a watchman, I guess. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating to me to try to interpret what's going on in the present day through the lens of the Bible, considering Bible prophecy. So anyway, the Antichrist is going to rise to power. He's going to create a one world religion. Now, all of the existing religions, at least Christianity, at least Islam, would not accept, anything anything that would go against what their religion teaches. Like, we kind of know that. So I feel like it has to be something new. And what would be easier to get people to accept as a religion than some type of alien religion, if this Antichrist figure rises to power and then, after he's established everything, reveals himself to be either an alien who appears as human, or just someone who can vouch for the aliens. So I think the alien religion, or the one world religion, may be an alien religion, something like Raelianism. I talked about that in an earlier episode. There are people who believe that the planet, humans were created by aliens, and they're gonna eventually come back, and then we're gonna ascend and be changed and be like them because they are our ascended. They're this advanced alien race who made us, and we're gonna have to go through some kind of upgrade to get on their level, and it's ultimately the next step for humanity. So I think the lie has already been put in place. They teach this in the New Age as well. Many people who channel spirits have heard similar things, which you're obviously being talked to by a demon, so that you don't want to get into witchcraft or the occult and then think you're getting the truth. You're not. So anyway, I think this is going to be the next big thing that's pushed, is something to do with aliens. And we've all been set up for this. We've all seen alien movies. We've all played a video game where you kill aliens or something. We've watched TV shows. We've read comic books, whatever. Aliens, the whole thing has been around forever. And sometimes they're depicted as bad, other times not so much. But this really, to get back to kind of the root of it, would be Roswell. And not that there weren't things that happened before. If you look at the Fatima, Portugal apparition, the apparition, that I believe was a UFO event. Catholics maintain that was the Virgin Mary who appeared to 3 kids. But what they described, people said they looked up, they saw a dull silver disc, cars exploded. I mean, it was a UFO event, I believe, and that was in 1917. And honestly, this is much older than that. So it's not something new, but it became popular really after Roswell. Why? Because most people aren't as stupid as the elites would like for you to be. So the whole Roswell thing, if you're not really familiar, there was a crash. There was an object that crashed, okay? And I think it was like, I don't know if it was nighttime or not, but the intelligence officer on the scene was someone by the name of Jesse Marcel Sr. And so he was called to go, check out this crash, which it crashed in 2 places. It crashed, it hit the ground, it jumped back up, and it crashed in another place. So there's debris everywhere, right? So he goes, they get on the scene, and then he goes home after he's done some investigating, and he had material with him. He woke up his son, Jesse Marcel Jr. He woke up his wife at 2 a.m. or so, and he said, look at this. You're never going to see anything like it again. It is not from Earth. And what he had was metal that was so thin that you would kind of describe it as tin foil, except if you crumple tin foil and then you smooth it back out, you see lines. You can tell you crumpled it. It won't be smooth. This would go completely smooth. So he woke them up. He said, look at this. You'll never see anything like it again. Jesse Marcel Jr., he's also dead now, but he remembered this. Obviously, I think he was like 11 at the time. So again, Jesse Marcel Sr. was the intelligence officer, not an idiot. All right. So he knew this is a craft that is not, and mind you, if you know where Roswell happened, it was where the 509th bombing group was, who were the only ones on planet Earth at that time with the nuclear. They're the ones who dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and stuff. So they had nukes. Nobody else had what they had. And so this just so happened to happen there. So Jesse Marcel Sr. is not an idiot, and he kind of knows what's up, right? So he's like, this craft was not something our military has. This is not like world. This is otherworldly, literally. So then all of a sudden, well, the newspaper ran a story that there was a crashed disc. They ran the story. And then General Ramey comes in. I think he was like from Dallas or something. He flies in and he's in a situation room essentially with Jesse Marcel Sr. and all these other people. And they're like, this is the story. This was a weather balloon. This was a weather balloon. That's what we're going with. So they get a hold of the paper and they tell them, rewrite your story. I know you already put it out the day before. Rewrite your story. And you're going to say that, false alarm, this was a weather balloon. So the newspaper reports that the next day. However, there was a telegram that was sent, And it mentioned, it was like two, I think General Ramey sent it to someone, and it mentioned a disc, and it was actually spelled two different ways, one with a C, one with a K, in the same telegram that was sent to someone else. So they're already, the cover up started like the day this happened, the day after. And then there's video of Jesse. There's the famous picture where Jesse Marcel Sr. is there with what they then tried to produce as the debris material, which was a trashed weather balloon they manufactured. And you can even see the look on his face, like, bro, I can't believe you expect me to believe that this is a retarded explanation. You have to be an idiot to buy it, but that's the story they ran with. They're told this is what the story's going to be. Don't talk about it. And then they flew in. I forget the name of the guy. I know Walter G. Hott was one of them. There are two different men. One of them, Walter G. Hott, is the one with a sealed affidavit that said, "Don't open this until the day I die," which happened, I don't remember when. It's a sealed affidavit, and he talks about what he actually saw at Roswell. The other one, I forget his name. I wish I could remember. He told his caregiver, he was being taken care of in his final years, really, or months, by a couple, and she knew that he had been in the military and that he had been affiliated with Roswell. So in his kind of last, the end of his life, she asked him, she said, "What about Roswell?" And his head shot up, and he said, "What about it?" And she said, "Well, what'd you see there? What'd you do?" And so he told her that it was his job to try to communicate with the pilots of this crashed craft. And he said, they honestly looked quite a bit like us. They were much shorter, 3-4 feet tall. I think he said they had 4 fingers instead of 5. I'm pretty sure is what he said. And he couldn't communicate with them. I think there were maybe 3, one or two. I think maybe 2 of them were already dead. One was still alive. 1 or 2 were still alive, and he was supposed to try to communicate. And then, but he was supposed to be hush hush about it as well. There are nurses who've talked about seeing bodies under tarps, and everybody's told, keep this on the DL. But, most everybody knows the government kept secrets at Roswell. Whether you want to believe those details or not is fine, but most people know the official story was a cover-up. So anyway, that's what kind of kicked off, the whole UFO thing that has only blown up since then. It's been increasing. They've renamed them UAPs to try to kind of, soften the term. They have USOs, which are things they see in the water, going into the water, coming out of the water, that type of thing. So the whole phenomenon has blown up. It's been increasing for decades now. And what's interesting is that we're just inching closer and closer to actual disclosure, because at first it used to be you're kind of a psycho or a weirdo, you're a lunatic if you think UFOs are real. And now we're at the point, it's like Marco Rubio is talking about it. You've had people testify before Congress. So we're way past conspiracy theories. Now we're at the point, well, what's the truth? So they're real. People actually are seeing these things. What are they? They're real. So what are you guys not telling us? So in my personal opinion, I do think some of the UFOs that people see are nuts and bolts. I think they're piloted either by our military, or they could be remote controlled like a drone. I think some of them are, and I think some of them are not. I think some of them are piloted by an entity that is not human. I don't think they're aliens, and I got into that in part 1 just a little bit ago that we ended. Again, with a biblical worldview, I do not believe there's intelligent life besides us. There isn't room for it scripturally. Even C.S. Lewis was like, well, we don't know that. And I was like, I think we do. No disrespect, you great man of God. But when you read the Bible, everything about it is about humanity. God's everything about him and what he's doing has to do with humanity. It's not like other things he made too on other planets that he cares about. It's about people. And the only things that we're aware of, obviously we have animals, but the only other intelligent life out there, if you want, is the spirit realm. You have angels and you have demons and you have their hierarchy, and that's all there is. So in my opinion, it's a demonic. If you see if there's an entity piloting a craft and it's not a craft our military made, back engineered, probably from a real one, I think it's some kind of demonic entity, and I'll get into like the biologics of that. But when I say, disclosure is imminent, it's because of the number of things that have come out in recent years, which was really kind of kicked off in 2017 when Commander David Fravor went on Tucker Carlson, before Tucker Carlson was glazing Islam and was before he sucked. So I wouldn't trust him now. But back then he had Commander David Fravor on, who was one of the first ones as a pilot in the military to talk openly about some stuff he saw. And Ryan Graves has come on the scene since then. You have people who've testified before Congress. You've had whistleblowers like Lou Elizondo and people like that talking about this stuff for years, but they were never given a very big platform and they weren't really taken seriously. But this Age of Disclosure film came out. That was this year, I think last month. Marco Rubio in it, and Lou Elizondo, I think, was in it, and a number of other people. So it's like we're inching closer and closer to actually having a statement made, and it might be by President Trump. He might be the one who stands up and says, we're not alone in this universe. Now, you have to ask yourself, how are you going to react if a statement like that is made? Even if it's not Trump, it could come from another country, another world leader, whatever. If that's said outright, how are you going to respond? And especially if it's said by someone you trust, how are you going to respond? So I already know how I'm going to, because I'm already expecting this to happen. And I already have my mind made up that I believe I know what they are. And I believe I know where this whole thing is going. Not because I'm smart, because I listen to people who are smart. And I've been following for over 10 years. So anyway, I want to run down some of the recent disclosure, and then I'm going to tell you some other things that we're also, I have a couple pictures I'm going to show you, which have not been, I can't say they haven't been public, but they've not been on the news. I think they're real. Of course, AI is making it much harder to tell, but I think they're real. And then we're going to watch the Kumburgaz footage, which I think is the best footage of a UFO ever, because you can actually see entities inside the craft doing something. And I'm guessing this could be confirmation bias on my end, but it seems they might be working on something lying on a table, which just so happens people who get abducted all have the same story. They ended up on a metal table. Experiments were done to them and they weren't good. So it's incredible footage. I'm probably going to have to mute it, or YouTube will be communists and they'll take it down. But anyway, let's read about some recent disclosure first. So, congressional action. So you've had recent congressional hearings on UAPs, which just happened in September of last year. And before that, mind you, a House Oversight Task Force held a UAP-focused hearing, bringing military veterans and whistleblowers before Congress to share previously unreleased details about unidentified aerial phenomena. This was expressly about transparency and potential national security implications. Lawmakers like Rep. Anna Luna, who's doing a great job, they're pushing for greater transparency and protection for insiders who want to reveal classified information about UAPs without fear or retaliation. Past hearings have included former military personnel discussing encounters with highly advanced unexplained objects seen by service members. So here's the thing. I would say if you're any pilot, but especially a military pilot, like, you're obviously of sound mind and you know what you're doing. You're a professional. You know how to manage your own craft. You also know a thing or two about aerodynamics and probably you have some idea of what's possible and impossible. So if you're going to listen to anybody, I would probably listen to the people who've been in the air and they know how to fly a plane or a jet or even a chopper. Next. So the Pentagon's official UAP office, which is called AARO, so it stands for All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is a real government initiative. It was established in 2022, so this is relatively recent, dedicated to collecting, investigating, and analyzing unidentified anomalous phenomena reported across air, sea, and space. That's why they have USOs, because they've seen things in the water as well. I gotta wonder if the Space Force, the creation of the Space Force, is partially to deal with this as well. There's stuff going on beyond just our like immediate atmosphere where we're flying planes and stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if the Space Force is because of this. So it regularly publishes some data and imagery and is positioned as a central clearinghouse for UAP reports. AARO exists publicly, but much of its work is detailed case files remain classified or heavily redacted. Big surprise there. The existence of an ongoing office, staffed, funded, and repeatedly called to testify before Congress is itself an institutional acknowledgement that UAPs are treated as a legitimate phenomenon with potential safety and security implications. So again, we're beyond conspiracy theories at this point, or they wouldn't be dedicating time, resources, and money to have an office which handles reports of sightings, which there's a collection. You can actually go on the website and look through, and there are collections of videos and pictures and things. Again, that's what's available for public viewing. So God only knows what they have that's not made public, but it exists for a reason. Number 3, major films and documentaries, which are fueling disclosure culture. So Spielberg is coming out with one this summer. It's directed, he's a director. It's called Disclosure Day. It's a high-profile science fiction film centered on humanity learning. It's not alone. Interesting. It's generating mainstream buzz, especially because Spielberg is tied to UFO mythology and popular culture. The tagline and marketing materials play on ideas of hidden truth. All will be disclosed, which feeds into the public expectations of real disclosure, even if the movie is fiction. So yeah, it's going to feature numerous military and government insiders. Oh, I'm sorry. This is for the documentary that just came out with Marco Rubio and them. So it has numerous military and government insiders alleging government concealment of UFO information. It frames whistleblower accounts as credible and positions the idea of official cover-ups in mainstream discourse. I actually haven't watched it yet. I think it's on Prime, and you can watch it for maybe $20 or something. I've been meaning to watch it, and I just haven't. I have listened to people who've watched it who've given their thoughts on it. Next. Whistleblowers and public testimony trends. Over recent years, including before and after 2025, former military and intelligence personnel, such as former Pentagon official, there's Lou Elizondo I mentioned, and others have presented testimony and imagery claiming unexplained phenomena. Some claims are controversial and debated, but they continue to stimulate public and congressional interest. In some cases, alleged visuals by drones or footage shared by lawmakers surfaced through hearings even without formal Pentagon release. One such video shared during a hearing showed a U.S. MQ-9. I can't read that. I think that's what it says. It's a drone attempting to engage an unidentified aerial object, an unusual revelation in itself. These whistleblower appearances are historic. U.S. officials speaking under oath publicly about their experiences was almost unheard of decades ago. That's what I'm saying. So it's like everybody kind of knew Roswell was like sus and they weren't telling the truth, but you didn't have people coming on the record, especially like before Congress and stuff, to testify like, nah, I saw stuff. Okay, I know about stuff that didn't happen until very recently, which tells me we're getting very, very close to someone making a statement. You guys, we're not alone in the universe. Next. Commander David Fravor, this is the one I mentioned that went on Tucker Carlson when he was still at Fox News. He talked about a Tic Tac encounter. So he's a retired U.S. Navy commander and experienced FA-18 fighter pilot. So he probably knows like what he's talking about. In 2004, while flying off the coast of Southern California, Fravor and his wingman were sent to investigate unusual radar contacts being tracked near the USS Nimitz carrier strike group. So they picked something up and they're like, listen, go find out what that is. He described seeing a white, smooth, oval-shaped object, nicknamed the Tic Tac because of its shape, hovering above the ocean with no wings, rotors, or visible propulsion systems. The object appeared to descend rapidly from high altitude to near the surface, hover, and then, as Fravor flew toward it, accelerated away at incredible speed and disappeared. Fravor said it performed maneuvers that didn't match known aerodynamics and outperformed his own modern fighter jet, concluding that the technology exhibited was far superior than anything that we had. He estimated the object to be about 40 feet long, though no confirmed explanation was ever provided after the encounter. Context Fravor's sighting became one of the most widely discussed UFO/UAP incidents because it was corroborated by radar data, other pilots, and later infrared military video released by the Pentagon. So his story is obviously not made up. It's not just one guy coming on in an interview and saying, listen, I saw something. Even that would have been enough to assume he saw something. But there's now radar and other things that corroborate what he said. Ryan Graves, multiple UAP encounters and patterns. So he is another former U.S. Navy F-18 pilot who has spoken publicly about UAP sightings during training missions and patrols. So it's crazy that it's like he's seeing this stuff when they're out doing like training and stuff. After his service, he became the executive director of Americans for Safety Aerospace and has testified before Congress on UAP reporting issues. So what he reported, Graves testified that UAPs were not rare, but appeared frequently. So it's not even like a one time, I saw something one time in my life. No, he's in the air a lot. He saw them frequently off the U.S. East Coast, particularly near Virginia Beach, which is, of course, a naval hub. It actually, I'd have to ask my husband, but it's either, I don't know, Norfolk is like maybe the biggest naval place we have. Maybe San Diego's bigger, but Virginia Beach is up there. While he was flying with a squadron. So that would mean other people saw this too. He described a specific incident in 2014 where pilots saw a clear sphere with a dark gray cube inside it, hovering motionless against the wind, something that looked unlike known aircraft or drones. In that encounter, two jets flying about 100 feet apart had to take evasive action because the object was directly in their flight path. Yikes! They ended the mission and returned to base. Graves also said that after enhanced radar systems were installed, UAP detections by infrared sensors increased, confirming that these objects were showing up on instruments before pilots visually confirmed them, meaning they weren't just imagining them. So Graves has emphasized that during his service, the official process for pilots reporting UAP incidents was informal and inconsistent, discouraging some crews from reporting what they saw, which is no surprise. He has advocated for better standardization and safety reporting mechanisms. So I don't know if he's still heading that organization or whatever, but he obviously wants people to not be discouraged from talking about what they've seen. God bless him. So how they framed their experiences, both were highly trained, disciplined military backgrounds with decades of flight experience. When testifying, they stressed that these weren't misidentified weather balloons or typical aircraft. Their descriptions focus on objects that seemed to defy known propulsion and flight characteristics. What they didn't say, they have not claimed these objects are extraterrestrial spacecraft explicitly. Their statements usually describe the behavior of the phenomena and how it was explained using conventional aerospace knowledge. Okay, so before I get into David Grush, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So like I said at the beginning, I do think some of these crafts that pilots see and even what other people capture with just like their phones, some of them, maybe most of them, are actually nuts and bolts, something our own government has created, because almost always when we find out about something new the government has, we're at least 10 years behind what they actually have, maybe closer to 30 years or more. So I do think, again, Bob Lazar, he came on the record in, I think, the 90s, and he talked about he was contracted, he was hired to back engineer the propulsion system of UFOs, and that was his job. So clearly, again, and now, why the crashes? Why the Roswell crash? Did they just suck at flying their craft? I don't think so. I think it was intentional. I think it was an intentional craft. It was a point of contact. It also just so happened to be where we had nuclear capabilities. It seems like Dr. Marzulli studied this. He said there's an increase of UFO activity where there's nuclear, where there are nukes. So he thinks that they are waiting potentially on a nuclear event, and that's when they show up, which wouldn't surprise me a bit. Why? Because you have everybody in panic. There's chaos. Everyone's terrified. And so that's prime time for something to come in and promise stability and peace well, don't worry, we're here to help you. We're from whatever planet or whatever. We're here to help you. We're here to get things under control. We don't want nukes going off. We made you guys. You're our our seed, whatever, and we're here to keep you from destroying yourselves. So you're gonna have to just let us help you. Yeah, you might have to take a chip under your skin, but it'll make you like us. And you know what? You won't be sick and you can live forever. And that's where we cross into the Bible and start getting into the mark of the beast and stuff, which I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So I don't want to get there yet. But there does seem to be increased activity near nukes. And, as far as the propulsion systems, if you have material in your hands, a machine, there are people who can take. My husband's good at that. If something is a machine, he can take it apart and put it back together. He can figure it out. So you have people who can do that. So if you have a craft of some kind that's way beyond where you're at, whether you're the military or whatever, probably a shadow portion of the military, if you have something in your possession, you can take it apart and then reproduce it. So I think many of the UFOs are just that. So there is either a person flying it or it's remote controlled, but not all of them. Not all of them. In fact, I think the OGs are certainly not piloted by people, which I'll get into. But before that, David Grush. So he's a former U.S. Air Force intelligence officer. Again, so not an idiot. And an ex-lead on unidentified anomalous phenomena, which is UAP analysis for U.S. government agencies. He came forward publicly as a whistleblower, claiming that United States agencies have not been transparent about what they know regarding UFOs or UAPs. This literally happened in like 2023, maybe, when he testified before Congress. It's just been in the last couple of years. So key points from his testimony, he mentioned the secret crash retrieval programs. Grush testified that he was made aware during his official duties of what he described as a multi-decade UAP crash recovery and reverse engineering programs. So see there, he's talked about the reverse engineering, same thing Bob Lazar talked about. Within the U.S. government, he said that he was denied access to the classified information. So all of this seems like it's always on a need-to-know basis, which even excludes the current president. I don't mean Trump. I mean whoever happens to be the president. It's like you don't. That's why Anna Paulina Luna can't get the answer she wants. Well, it's a need-to-know basis, Miss, Luna or whatever, and you don't need to know. So it's very hush-hush. Where am I at here? David Grush. Is this more on David Grush? No. Okay. So I'm going to play the interview in case you haven't seen this. I've played it before, but this was like a year ago. This is David Grush testifying before Congress. Nancy Mace from South Carolina is the one questioning him. This might get this episode taken off of YouTube, but I'm willing to take that chance. I'm not even on YouTube yet, so it's fine.
Committee on National Security conducted its hearing today on UFOs.
3 former members of the military intelligence community testified, including a former Air Force intelligence officer who answered questions from.
You've stated that the government is in possession of potentially non-human spacecraft. Based on your experience and extensive conversations with experts, do you believe our government has made contact with intelligent extraterrestrials?
Something I can't discuss in public setting.
Okay, I can't ask when you think this occurred. If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
As I've stated publicly already in my News Nation interview, biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human, and that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program I talked to that are currently still on the program.
In efforts to cover up.
Retired.
Okay, so that was the main part I wanted you to see. So he literally testified before Congress and said, we have biologics, we have bodies of the pilots and they're non-human. Okay, so now I don't know if this is a managed agenda. Why does this sound so weird? This could be a managed agenda where somebody appointed Dave Grush to go and testify before Congress. That way we get a little bit of disclosure here. We get a little bit closer. We get desensitized to it. We start to expect that there are aliens out there, guys, and we've been in contact with them and our military knows, blah, 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 blah. So it could be a managed agenda. But it also might be just him coming forward. I don't know. I don't know if someone put him up to it or not. But the point is that, again, you're willing to testify before Congress. You're serious about what you're saying. So when it comes to bodies, again, to go back to Roswell, you had different people talk about having seen the bodies. There was the one who was flown in, and he said it was his job to try to communicate with them. And he didn't get anywhere, I don't think. If anything, there was a voice to skull, like telepathy is another word for it, which is literally what happens when people get into the occult. So that's your first red flag. But anyway, there's a conspiracy theory that the bodies, although dead, were flown to Wright Pat, which is in Dayton, Ohio. I don't know if it had that name back then when Roswell happened, but there's conjecture, or there's, a theory they were flown there. So I'll tell you why people say that. So Wright-Patterson Air Force Base was the nerve center of U.S. military aviation intelligence in the late 1940s. It housed air material. I don't know what that is. Command and later Foreign Technology Division. It was where the U.S. sent captured Nazi aircraft, experimental tech, and anything exotic. It had secure labs, medical facilities, and intelligence analysts already in place. So if the military had recovered anything unknown, Wright Pat was the most logical destination. This alone made it the default answer to the question, where would they take it? And this is so much more than that. I don't know how much time I have to get into it. Where's my next one? We're past that. Bear with me. Is this it? Nope. Am I missing one? Yeah, hold on. I missed my point number 2. So it already was a place where they took weird things, right? So that's why people are like, they probably flew the bodies to Wright Pat and had their own reasons for thinking so. So early Roswell narratives already pointed there. Right after the Roswell incident, multiple informal accounts circulated inside and outside the military claiming wreckage was quickly moved out of New Mexico. High-ranking officers were involved, material like General Ramey for one. Material was flown to a secure intelligence base, not stored locally. Even before alien bodies entered the story, Wright Pat was already being named as the end point for recovered debris. Point 3, witness claims about bodies and transport. Over the years, several individuals claimed direct or secondhand knowledge of bodies being moved to Wright Pat. The most cited themes, small humanoid bodies recovered alongside wreckage, which matches what that guy said in his deathbed confession. Bodies placed in sealed containers or coffins, transport by military aircraft, sometimes described as a stopover before Dayton. Some witnesses later said they were told the bodies were sent to Wright-Patterson for medical analysis. Critics note these accounts often emerge years later, but supporters argue that's exactly what you'd expect if people were threatened or sworn to secrecy, which I agree with. If you're told don't talk about this or we'll kill you, you probably wouldn't talk about it. At least not for a long time. That's why Jesse Marcel Sr., there's an interview of him like standing in a field, and he mentions that General Ramey, when he came into the situation, he's like, this is the story. This was a weather balloon. And there he is years later as an old man. And he said, we both knew that's not what it was. So he had to go along with it because you're either going to lose your job at the least, and at the most, you might get killed if you start to speak against the official narrative. So that would make sense if people didn't say something. So what's the next one? Medical and intelligence facilities fuel the claim. So Wright Pat wasn't just about aircraft. It had aerospace medicine labs. It supported classified pathology and human factors research. It later became associated with the Air Force's most sensitive investigations. That made it plausible, in theory, that non-human biological material would be examined there rather than at a field base like Roswell. This is why, decades later, when Congress hears phrases like non-human biologics, many people mentally connect that back to Wright Pat. So again, anyone who's somewhat, what happened here? Electrocuted. Anyone who's somewhat familiar with what happened at Roswell would, when you hear David Grush talking to Congress and he mentions non-biologics were taken, or I'm sorry, biologics that were non-human were taken, then you'd be like, oh, where have we heard this before? So, Project Blue Book added to the mystique. This was from 1952 to 1969. It was headquartered at Wright-Patterson, even though Blue Book it officially dismissed UFOs as mundane or misidentified phenomena. The fact that UFO reports, physical evidence, and intelligence analysis were centralized there reinforced the belief that the real material never went public. To believers, Blue Book looked like a filter, not a full disclosure mechanism. Again, a managed agenda. Here, let me just say this. If you've ever been a liar, and I can say this because I was one, I was a pathological liar before I was saved for real. If you want to tell a good, and I'm not trying to like encourage people to lie. I'm simply saying, if you want to tell an effective lie, you throw in just enough truth to make it believable, or you admit partial guilt to something else. Because if you're willing to kind of throw yourself under the bus and be like, yeah, like I did do this, then you throw the suspicion off of you. Well, why would they, if they're not telling the truth, why would they admit to this? So that's how you tell a compelling lie. I don't know if I can hear myself now. Okay, yeah. So in the case of that, if they were to say, oh, we collect UFO reports or whatever, that makes people think, well, then they're taking the phenomena seriously. They're collecting these reports and treating them like they're real. So naturally, we must be getting the truth, right? Kind of like Arrow. Arrow is probably the modern day version of that. Yeah, we collect UFO sightings and videos and all this stuff, and we're tracking all this stuff to make people think if then there was more to it, we would know about it because that program exists, which we know isn't the case. There's limited amount of information that's available to the public and quite a bit they keep back. Next. I already read that. What the heck am I doing? This is all still about Wright Pat and why people think they would have sent the bodies there. Next. Okay. There we go. The Air Force's later explanations didn't erase suspicion. Decades later, the Air Force claimed Roswell debris was Project Mogul balloons. Bodies were anthropomorphic test dummies used in the 1950s, which of course is after Roswell. But critics point out test dummies came years after 1947. Early witnesses described organic bodies, not mannequins. The explanations changed over time, which raised suspicion. For many, the shifting narrative made the Wright Pat body transfer story feel more believable, not less. And I would agree. They've been caught with their pants down, and the story is not adding up. So why the claim still survives today? The belief persists because it sits at the intersection of a real secretive military base with the right capabilities, multiple independent but unverified testimonies. Again, word of mouth. If you can't trust anybody by word of mouth, then you have to throw out literally every history, but everything we know like came from word of mouth. And unless you have a physical artifact, which exists in some cases, but it's like most stories are told because of eyewitness accounts. People were like, I was there and that's how that happened. So, you know, we can't act like we can't just throw out eyewitness accounts because what they're reporting sounds weird or unnatural. I mean, there are weird people out there who make things up for money, people who do acid and think they saw something. You have to vet things, of course, but you can't just dismiss everything. Well, where's the video proof? I don't know. Maybe you didn't have a phone in your pocket in 1947 to document it. I'm sorry. You know, you're going to have to take somebody at their word. So longstanding distrust of official explanations, modern whistleblowers reviving phrases like non-human biologics, even without proof, the story feels structurally plausible to many people. And then last thing, oh, that's okay. Well, that's a picture of something called the Calvine UFO, which happened in Scotland. So that's a real picture from 1990, I believe. And yeah, it says August of 1990. I don't know. That's like the perfect UFO in my opinion. It's not tic-tac shaped like what David Fravor saw. But that looks like your standard typical UFO. If you ask somebody to draw a picture of a UFO, I feel like that's what a lot of people would draw. So notice that's before Photoshop, really. That's definitely before AI. It's a real picture. Back to Right Pat, before I get into the Kumburgaz video or the pictures I'm going to show you. I have, again, this is hearsay, but I have heard there have been people who've either been at Right Pat or worked there, and they've said that even to this day, there's a particular wing where you need high security clearance to go in. There are armed guards at the doors. You can't just get in there, and you can smell formaldehyde. So obviously that's used to preserve bodies and things like that. So that's hearsay. I don't know if that's true or not, but I would not be surprised if they do still have the bodies from Roswell. I bet you they have bodies from other crashes. I bet you they have tons of crafts that they've back engineered. David Barber was another one who came on the record. If it wasn't last year, it was the year before. He's demon possessed. You can tell. He even said it was his job to work as he worked on a UFO retrieval team. And that's what they did. And there's an interview. I've played it in an earlier episode where he said there was some kind of entity there. And he said he felt something enter him. And you can tell in his eyes, yes, you have something on the inside of you, sir. And it's not good. But he came on the record as well. And so I'm sure the government has a lot more materials, bodies, and parts of crafts that and completely constructed crafts that they've probably modeled after the crashes, and being able to back engineer a propulsion system, thing like that they've probably kept hidden. Now, here's what I think will happen is when we have a statement made, whether it's President Trump or anyone else, when a statement is made, we're not alone in the universe, I bet you anything they're going to produce evidence. They're going to show us bodies. They're going to show us crafts, so that everyone like me who's like, oh, I knew it. So it was covered up. This stuff was kept back from the public for years. It will make this story convincing. And here's the thing, there is something real. There is physical evidence. I'm not saying that this stuff isn't real or that it will be dummies that they're going to produce. I believe there are real things to it, but you can rest assured you're going to be lied to about the origin of this stuff. You're going to be told that these are the aliens we always suspected were out there, and we're not alone in the universe. And then there's going to be this whole thing, probably we need to be friends with them. They have higher tech than we do, and we need that. They're advanced, and we need that. So I guarantee you they'll have evidence that they're going to throw out there when they make the statement, but you're being lied to about the source, and the source is absolutely something evil with a nefarious agenda. And I don't think it's anything new. It's been around since Bible times. So before I get into that, which I think tells us everything we need to know about the subject, before I do, I'm going to show you the Kumburgaz UFO video. This was from Kumburgaz, Turkey. I think it was 2008. And Dr. Roger Lear was there in Turkey when this footage was taken. It was in the night, and he's the same one who I think he was like a podiatrist or something. And when he was, I don't know, someone complained about foot pain, something like that, he found some kind of implant under their skin. And he was like, well, I don't know what that is. So what led him, they removed it. They sent it to different labs, one of which was in Canada, and they didn't know what it was. They were like, whatever this implant is that was in this person's foot is the outside of it is coated in some kind of material that we can't identify, even the metal aspect of it. It's close to certain alloys, but it's not quite a match. And I don't know what this thing is. And so that led him to be like, but here's the thing. The person that he removed that from their foot, you know what their story, because he said, where'd this come from? Their story was, I was abducted by what I can only describe as aliens, and this thing showed up and started giving me foot pain after that encounter. So he was like, well, you have my attention because I can tell there's something in your foot that we can't identify. I know it's real. I took it out. So then he went on to start really studying the subject. And then he came on to Dr. Marzulli's Watchers videos, because they found it was like 17 people total, 16 or 17 people total, who had been abducted by aliens, and they all had an implant in their skin. And so he did implant removal surgeries. And again, can't identify what they are. We don't know what this alloy is. We don't know what this material is. One of them moved away from his instrument. He's using stainless steel instruments to remove this thing. It moved away in the person's skin, away from his instruments. Another one disappeared on the screen. And Dr. Marzulli was in the waiting room, and he prayed against it, and it showed back up on the screen, and they were able to take it out. One of them, they took it apart in different pieces. And when they put it in a jar, left for the day, came back, it was back in one piece in the jar. They were like, unless somebody broke into the office, that can't happen. So it's weird. The whole thing's weird, which led him to start studying the subject. He's dead now. I think he died in 2014. But anyway, this footage I'm going to show you, he was there when this was taken. So I'm going to put it up on the screen. This will probably get YouTube to take. Oh, well, I guess I can mute it. Oh, I'm sorry. 2007. Okay. There it is.
Sadece harika. Öyle sınır. Nerede abi? Işık öbür tarafa gidiyor. Ciddi söylüyorum, ışık bir tarafa gidiyor.
Reported in the paper. Picture of it there. Yeah, so Dr. Roger Lear actually filmed this in 2009. So you can see something in there. See, there's things inside the craft. It's blurry. I get it.
There was a bright full moon, and below the moon was this little bright spot. We didn't know what it was, and we were filming out over the water. There was no structures in the water. There was no oil platforms. There was no ships going by, and we zoomed in. This camera had a 200 millimeter lens and an electronic doubler, so we were able to get very tight on the leading edge of the craft. The craft, you have to realize, is being lit by the moonlight, which is, as I said, a very bright moon. And then right in the front of the craft, there appeared to be 3 windows, viewing ports, whatever you want to call them. And standing in these viewing ports were typical bumper sticker gray aliens. And I saw this, I looked through the camera myself, and unfortunately, we recorded it. That video went to a university in Istanbul and went over extremely intense scrutiny by the Turkish government, and then the video was also sent to the UK and several other countries for analysis. By the time all that had been done, it had already been on the internet and could absolutely not be suppressed from the public.
All right.
Recently,
So, well, let's see if there's anything else interesting. Something else he saw, which looks like kind of like orbs, maybe. Or, I don't know. Anyway, so the footage is real. You can see something inside. So, in my opinion, that would be a UFO that is not constructed by people and not piloted by people. Now, when he says typical gray aliens, when people are abducted, more often than not, what they report is that they're abducted by the little grays. They look like aliens. Every depiction you've seen, the big black eyes, little tiny nose, slit for a mouth, big heads, they're short, kind of a sickly gray color. Those seem to be the worker bees of this whole thing, where they go get people, they transport them. They're in the crafts oftentimes. Now, I don't believe they're aliens having a biblical worldview. I believe they're nothing more than demonic spirits of some kind. And what they're in is a suit of some kind, whether it's made from biological material, maybe has been taken from people they've abducted. However it's been constructed, I think it's for lack of a better word, avatar. It's like an avatar that allows a demonic spirit to be there physically and not that demons can't. I mean, if you've ever, demons can attack people and leave physical scratches and things like that, but in order to be able to maneuver in the natural, an avatar, a suit of some kind gives them that ability. So I think that's what they are. Now, where exactly did the material come from to make the suit? I don't know. Could be from anything. But I think that's what they are. Why? Because the abductions are never good. No one's ever, people get like raped. They take ovum from women. They take sperm from men. They get violated. People are taken from the time they're little kids. Oftentimes they're implanted against their will. They're always terrified. People who've been abducted regularly, you know what's coming. There's almost like a buzzing sound. They know when it's coming. It's not a good thing. So when they make their statement, we're not alone in the universe, there will be people who will say, yeah, they're aliens and they're good. They're here to help us. But for anyone who's ever been abducted, you would know nothing about this is good. They do not have a good agenda. If you were good guys out there from another part of the universe, and you're advanced and you have knowledge and technology we don't have, why not cure cancer? Why not give us, I don't know, everybody have clean water, every place they live on planet Earth? Why not do something like that? If you care about humanity and you want to help, you clearly can with the capabilities you have. So they're obsessed with the sexual or the reproductive components of humans. I think they're responsible for cattle mutilations, which are disgusting. I talked about those in a recent episode and a way earlier episode. I think they're responsible for crop circles. You can technically do crop circles with some strings and boards, but only if the stalks are like a certain height and only if you have hours or days or months on your hands and you're able to do it without anyone seeing. Not likely. So, so that being said, I think they're demonic beings. I think what we're seeing is the modern version of Genesis 6, where the sons of God, which were fallen angels, came into the daughters of men, which were human beings, and they had a sexual relationship. And then the offspring of that was the Nephilim, which were the giants, which were not human. They were a hybrid being, if you will, and they were evil. And then right after this happened, God sent the flood. So clearly that was a perversion and a corruption on God's creation that he was not cool with, and flooded the earth. But we do know the Nephilim came back after that. It says it word for word. They were on the earth in those days and also afterward. So they came back. The giants were all over, the Nephilim were all over the land as Israel made their way to Canaan, to the promised land. And you know what? You know what's interesting? If you're like, maybe they were good giants. No, God always told the Israelites to kill them. Always. And he even said, kill the animals and stuff. Don't leave any living thing. So clearly there was something there that God was unwilling to let stay alive. And since God's not just genocidal, you know, there was obviously, those weren't people. God loves people. He didn't like the Nephilim because they weren't people. So again, Jesus said, it'll be as it was in the days of Noah, so will it be in the coming of the Son of Man. So if that happened, if the Genesis 6 account happened in the days of Noah, and Jesus says it'll be that same way right before I come again, we should expect the same behavior. And again, Daniel 2:43, their seed will mingle with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave to them. Their seed communicates, their seed and then the seed of men are two separate things. So that communicates there's going to be something that's going to be having a conflict with humanity. So again, and Daniel's a prophetic end times book. So there's that. And then to trace it all the way back to the origin in Genesis 3:15, in the garden, immediately after Adam and Eve sin, and God looks at Satan, the serpent, and he's cursed are you above all livestock, on your belly you'll go, you're going to eat dust. But he says, I will put enmity between your seed and the seed of the woman. You shall strike his heel, but he's going to crush your head. So there's a seed of the dragon that was prophesied about in Genesis 3:15. If you take that literally, then there's a demonic seed that is having a conflict with humanity. And so, and we're almost at the end. Like if you look at Bible prophecy, this thing is just about over. And so we should actually expect this type of thing to be happening. So in my opinion, this is the only thing that can account for everything, because if you consider what are the unknowns we have, well, we still have questions about how the pyramids were built. If you watch Ancient Aliens, they'll tell you aliens built them. We have questions about Stonehenge. We have questions about the mounds here in Ohio. They have like, you know, celestial alignments. The Nazca lines in Peru, you need an aerial view to be able to even, you don't know what you're looking at. And then back to the mounds, you need to know like spherical trigonometry. Native Americans didn't have the capability of knowing those things, much less even the manpower to be able to move. I mean, if aliens show up, they can explain UFOs. They can explain the pyramids. They can explain whatever they want to. They can explain, you know, disappearances. They're going to have to paint that in a positive way, but they can fill in all of those holes. So it'll be a convincing story. And again, with evidence. Yes, we have bodies. Yes, we have crashed craft. Yes, we've been in contact with them, and they're here to help us. Because look, I mean, we all know the climate thing is a hoax, but it's been this push. Hey, we're running out of resources. Our planet this isn't sustainable for the next generation. We're coming to the end of our genetic rope. Infertility is on the rise. You guys have just about exhausted every resource you have. So if you want humanity to be able to continue, you're going to have to merge with something else, which just so happens here we are, aliens from this other planet. We're an advanced civilization, and we have the answer. In fact, you'll get an upgrade, a DNA upgrade. And it'll just be in the form of a vaccine or some kind of implant under your skin. And then boom, there you have the mark of the beast, which is interesting that in the Bible, when you take the mark of the beast, you're going to the lake of fire. There's no chance to repent after that. You're going. So is it just because they chose to worship the beast and just because they rejected God? Or is there an actual DNA change where you turn your back on your God-given identity made in the image of God, you turn your back on that and you take on the identity of the seed of the serpent, and you're no longer redeemable at that point, because the giants, they didn't have a chance. God, God wasn't like, I want you to try to convert the giants and try to, they're huge and they can move things and they're mighty in war, so we could really use them to fight our enemies. No, he's like, go kill all of them. They didn't have like a chance to be good. So I think that if something is demonic in nature, it doesn't have a redeemable soul like human beings have. So I think that's where it's headed. But they're going to tell a very convincing story that'll come with evidence. And we just need to accept, that aliens have always been around. They've been watching us. They care about us in this crucial time. Here they are to help us. In fact, I've mentioned this before, there's a book called The Bringers of the Dawn, and it's written by a lady named Barbara Marciniak, who is in the New Age. So you're in the occult, and she channels spirits. So in this book, she receives this information that says, there's coming a time of earth changes. Okay. And those who would get in the way of the earth changes will be removed in a single afternoon, or there's the potential for that to happen. So boom, right there, you've explained away the rapture of the church. You guys were in the way of the earth changes, so you were removed. And then it even, I've read excerpt. I'm not going to read the book because I don't want to get demon possessed, but I've read excerpts of it, and it talks about this woman who is being talked to by evil spirits, writes about how our DNA is currently limited and it's keeping us from reaching the full potential of humanity. So basically, we need to accept a DNA upgrade, according to her, who again is channeling evil spirits. So again, I think it goes back to the Garden of Eden. How did he entice Eve to eat the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? He said, you're not going to die. You're going to be like God, and you're going to have your eyes opened, knowing good from evil. So it's this suggestion that you are not good enough the way that you are now. But if you just do what I'm telling you to do, you're going to get a little bump up. You're going to be a step up from humanity if you'll just do what I tell you to do. She did. And what happened? Did she become like God? No. Sin and sickness and evil and death entered the world when they did that. So it was a lie, and it always is. So that being said, let me show you a couple of pictures. These are actually relatively recent, and I'll tell you what I think we're looking at. This was sent to Dr. Marzulli, who I would consider to be the expert on the entire UFO situation. And he's the reason I am the way that I am. He looks through things, looks through the Bible. That's his lens to interpret what's going on. So someone sent this to him, what appears to be a portal in the sky with a UFO coming through it. Again, I understand AI is on the rise, and so it's getting more and more difficult to tell what is real and what isn't. But he thinks this is real as far as he can tell, and I agree. I think portals are again, it sounds science fiction-y, but I think that's how you would be able to navigate from the spirit realm to the natural realm. Because obviously, again, if you just read the Bible, it's not a crazy concept. Angels can take on they can appear as humans, Genesis 18. They can eat food, Genesis 18. They can have homos in Sodom and Gomorrah can want to have sex with them, Genesis 18 or 19. I think it's later in 18. I don't know. And demons can do the same. They're obsessed with humanity, right? Again, we are it. It is about us. It's not about anything else. God's primary focus is people. Therefore, Satan's primary focus is people, just from the opposite way. So naturally, we know that the spiritual is very involved with the natural. So that begs the question, how do you travel in between the spirit realm and the natural? because God's in, he's in the third heaven. And yet there are angelic and demonic encounters that happen here. So that being said, I think portals are real. And I do think for the UFOs that are not government controlled and constructed by people, I think there are UFOs that are piloting fallen angels or demonic entities, which are probably the little grays, which are abducting people and doing the sexual experiments on them and breeding the little satanic army that they're breeding. Again, when Satan was kicked out of heaven, he took 1/3 of the angels with him, which means 2/3 stayed in heaven, which means Satan's outnumbered 2-1. So he knows what's coming for him. So, is it out of the question that he would be breeding an army? No, not out of the question at all. But he doesn't have creative power. And he always has to steal from something real that God made. God has creative power. Satan doesn't. So he always has to corrupt and use and steal what God already made, which is why he needs people, which is why he needs ovum and he needs sperm, and he needs to take advantage of that, which again, it already happened in Genesis 6. So it's not like something made up. But speaking of the Bible, I was curious if the Bible mentions anything about vehicles in the air, and it just so happens that it does. So let's read. Ezekiel's chariot, there were no horses. So let me explain why it's talking about horses. So Dr. Marzulli brought up Elijah, when Elijah was taken up, it says he went up to heaven and there was a chariot of fire. So when you read that, you probably picture like an old school gladiator type chariot being drawn by horses. And it's just on fire. That's what I always pictured. And then there's another story similar. I think it's in 2 Kings where Elisha, the Syrian army is coming and his servant's freaking out. And Elisha said, go outside and look, or something like that. And so the servant goes and looks, and he said, there's the Syrian army I can see in the hills or whatever, but he saw chariots of fire above the Syrian army, meaning they're in the air. Now, Dr. Marzulli brought up chariot of fire. Well, what does that mean? If you lived in Bible times, what do you know as a vehicle? The only things that could be considered vehicles would be chariots. You probably wouldn't refer to a donkey or a horse or a boat. It would be a chariot, right? And then fire, well, you don't have electricity, so you're not going to say lights. You're going to describe something as having fire. So Dr. Marzulli was saying, maybe what Elisha's servant saw was actually UFOs, which were vehicles, and they had lights. They weren't actually chariots on fire. So I was looking into that, but in that, so this is no disrespect to Dr. Marzulli, but in the original language, it mentions horses. So I thought if horses are mentioned, I'm guessing you're actually looking at some kind of chariot. How is it in the air? I don't know, but how are we going to come back with Jesus on white horses? We're going to come down from the air on horses. So clearly in the spirit, there can be horses in the air, literal, So I'm not using, so I wanted to know, does the Bible talk about any type of vehicle in the air that doesn't include horses? Because if horses are mentioned, then I'm assuming it's an actual chariot, not a UFO, not a disc, not something like that. But there are instances where vehicles are mentioned without horses. So from Ezekiel chapters 1 and 10, it says, this is the most detailed mobility system in the Bible, and horses are never mentioned. The key Hebrew terms: wheels, which are whatever those words are, spirit/wind, expanse/firmament, and glory of the Lord. So there's something in the air with wheels, but not with horses. And again, if I'm not disciplined enough and I don't have the drive to learn Hebrew or Greek. I sort of wish that I did, because I would understand the Bible a lot better. I just don't have it in me. I even gave up on learning Spanish. So I can't do it. But when it comes to a certain subject, I do love to ask about the original language, because sometimes it paints a different picture from what seems to be said in the text, because some things are lost in translation. Even though the translators of the Bible did their best, sometimes things are just lost in translation unless you know what the original word meant. So that's why I was asking about the Hebrew. So what it says is wheels move in any direction without turning. Wheels lift off the ground. Movement is controlled internally. The spirit is in the wheel. So it has, it doesn't have like a power source, like an engine that's visible. The throne is above the platform. The whole structure moves between heaven and earth. Boom! So you have an access point. Something is moving between heaven and earth. It doesn't say he saw a portal, but there's obviously a way to do it. No horses, no animals, no drivers. This is a self-directed airborne mobile platform. Later, Jewish theology literally calls this Merkava, the chariot, even though no horse term appears anywhere. So the word chariot was put there, even though it doesn't, there was never any depiction of horses, which you are going to expect if you're talking about an actual chariot. So the second mention is in Isaiah, Isaiah 6:1. It says, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne high and lifted up. So in the Hebrew, throne is whatever that word is, and it means it's elevated or lifted up. So it's elevated, mobile in heavenly space, not earthbound, not pulled or carried by horses. Seraphim are present, but they are attendants, not propulsion. So it somehow, it has the ability to be elevated and in the air, again, without a visible engine or power source of any kind. And then Daniel, thrones with wheels of fire. Again, no horses. Daniel 7:9, his throne was fiery flames. Its wheels were burning fire. Original Aramaic, wheels and fire. Throne plus wheels plus fire, 0 horses. This is clearly something mobile. This mirrors Ezekiel, and Daniel is writing in Aramaic, not Hebrew, which strengthens the case that this imagery is intentional, not poetic coincidence. Obviously, they had words to describe chariots and horses, and both writers chose not to, which means that what they're seeing was not a horse or a chariot. Is this what I just read? No. Psalm 18/2 Samuel 22, riding on the cherub. So it says, he rode upon a cherub and flew. He soared upon the wings of the wind. To ride, to fly, whatever those Hebrew words are. I don't know how to try. This is explicit aerial movement, no horses, no chariot named, no ground reference. So something, and this, keep in mind, these are all angelic good things. These are not fallen angels or demons. These are angels. So the Bible uses multiple mobility categories. Chariots of fire and kings, the horses are mentioned. Heavenly armies, horses are mentioned, but not in these last 4 that I just gave you. So horses are clearly not required for divine mobility, air travel, or inter-realm movement, which means there can be something with mobile capabilities that is somehow suspended in the air without anything, obviously pulling it or giving it its maneuverability. So they appear when military imagery is intended, not when throne technology or glory transport is being described. So there's a military aspect to that, which why am I talking about that is because the Bible has the answers, in my opinion. UFOs don't make sense why they break the rules of physics. As the pilots mentioned, they moved in such a way that we don't have anything that can move like that. They literally defy the laws that govern our world, gravity and everything else. They can't do those things by our rules. There's something about this that's like extra human or whatever. It's super natural because it's not natural. So the point I'm making is the Bible tells us clearly there are ways of moving in the air without being drawn by horses, which I'm not ruling out horses in the air. That's obviously a thing too. But the point is that there's a spiritual aspect to there being mobile objects in the sky. And again, Not 100% of them, because I do believe our military or our government has reconstructed what they've gathered from these UFO retrievals. But the source of this, I believe, is spiritual. And I do think that probably more often than not, the ones that people are encountering that look like a disc or whatever probably are negative. They're piloted by something evil, not angels necessarily. Not that they couldn't. Maybe good angels travel in something similar. I don't know. But I think that it's usually something negative. Oftentimes people, well, I mean, you can't even rule out fear, because almost every time an angel appeared to someone in the Bible, the first thing out of their mouth was, do not fear, because everyone's first reaction was to be terrified. I would be, if there's a huge, bright looking person who doesn't look like a person, I'd be like terrified too, probably pee my pants a little. So there's probably a reason they said that. But the point is, I believe the Bible makes room for this, that what you're seeing that defies physics is supernatural. It's something spiritual in origin. So whether it's our government or even another government, they make a statement, we're not alone in the universe, please consider what I said. And you don't have to take my word for it. Go to L.A. Marzulli's website. He's the one who did the films on Roswell. He interviewed Jesse Marcel Jr.'s widow and his daughter. They went to the Roswell site. It's out in the middle of nowhere. And they took metal detectors out there. You know what they found? A guy by the name of Frank Kimbler found buttons he identified them, buttons that matched army uniforms from the 1940s in the ground. What are they doing in the ground? And then they also found metal spikes 12 inches long that had been driven into the ground. And they found shards of metal that had clearly been through some kind of major impact. And they've sent it to different labs, and it doesn't match any alloys. So you got, what do the buttons mean? I'm guessing it means guys in the military were down on their hands and knees gathering up debris, and some buttons fell off. Why were there metal spikes in the ground? That way, they drove them into the ground. That way, if someone comes along later with a metal detector, they're going to pick up the metal spikes and they're going to say, oh, nothing to see here, and they're going to leave. But they didn't. They kept looking, and then they found the metal that doesn't match any alloys. It's between two known alloys, not quite a match. And then the one it almost matches wasn't even invented until like the 50s. So after the Roswell event. So it's a government cover-up. And I'm sure there are people, even people working on the UFOs, whatever these black sites are, that probably don't know the source of this stuff. They're just going to work. They've probably signed NDAs, but they probably don't understand the source of it. And then I'm sure you have people high enough up that they do know the source of this stuff, and they've agreed. They've made an exchange, in my opinion, with these entities. Hey, in exchange for access to people, which you need for your breeding program, we'll give you access to the people if you give us access to the technology to create these crafts. Why? Well, we're always in a race against the Chinese, against the Russians. That happened in World War II, Operation Paperclip. We'll bring Nazi scientists over here because we can't let the Soviets get what the Nazis had first. And the Nazis had some stuff none of us have. So what did they know? What were they accessing? And the Nazis were into the occult. Hitler consulted with mediums. They were looking for, the Vril, which was supposedly this power source that was that came from some kind of subterranean, non-human race of God knows what. Again, probably just demonic entities of some kind. I don't think, UFOs are typically seen in the sky, but they also see them going into the ocean oftentimes. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's stuff underground, and I don't just mean like the Epstein tunnels underground or the underground tunnels that the elites get to use. There's probably more down there in the earth than just railway, the Denver airport, or the highways that connect Los Angeles in the 1930s. In the 1930s, they found underground tunnels, and they even reported in the paper that there were non-human lizard type, God knows what things living under Los Angeles. So how many reports, again, you can write it all off as people are just sensational and they're making it up, or they want to sell papers or get their 15 minutes of fame. You can, but you have to understand there are so many moving pieces. And if you accept the biblical narrative, you explain all of it, which is why I don't think there's any other explanation. If you're going to go with the alien one, then you have to ignore good and evil, essentially. You have to ignore the spiritual side of things, which you can't. I mean, you can tell yourself it isn't real, but you can't actually ever deal with it. And God forbid you'll find out at the end of all things, wow, heaven and hell were actually real. Wow, the God of the Bible was actually, he's it. Wow, Jesus actually came and died for me, and I died without him, so I'm going to hell. Everyone will find out eventually, but you just can't fill in the holes. Again, the stories of the people who, like Phil Schneider, who died after he made his public comments about how he was contracted to go underground and do something, and you had to sign an NDA and you had to agree not to speak the name Jesus. Well, why is that? Because the things that you're going to encounter down there that we're working with don't like that name. Well, that's how demons react to that one specific name, not Buddha, not Muhammad, not Krishna or Brahman or whatever. Jesus, one name. Why is that? So there's a spiritual aspect to this whole thing. And the answers are in the Bible. They explain everything that happened. It explains everything that is happening, and it explains everything that is to come. It's all there. It takes some revelation. It takes some study, but it's all there. It's the only thing that checks every box. But rest assured, you're going to be offered a narrative that you're going to be expected to believe that there are aliens. And yes, we have proof of that. We have bodies that we're going to produce and all kind of stuff. We have the crafts. We have plenty of people come on the record, and the evidence will be real. It's just the origin of it is what's going to be a lie. So I believe that's all I have to say for this part. I am going to get into part 3. It's 7:47. I'm going to come back at 8 o'clock with a new live stream on X and Rumble and Instagram. I'll pop these up real quick before I leave. And we'll finish up part 3 of episode 95, which I'm going to get into the Bible on a completely different subject. We're not going to talk about aliens. We're not going to talk about devils. We're going to take what the Bible says about praise. And the interesting thing about it, these are the ways to follow, by the way, where I'm going to post content and stuff. And then this is, if you want to support Amber Alert Podcast, those are the ways that you can. Anyway, back to, there's a certain commandments in the Bible that people think it's just because God, because he's sovereign and he just wants it that way. And it's not just that. It's like everything he told us to do is for our own benefit. And when we don't do it, there's either a consequence for not doing it, or we're just not at the level he would have us be at. We live like a subpar or a less joyful, a less victorious, less successful life, or your health suffers or something. It's like everything he told us to do is for our own good. It's not to demand stuff of us just because he's God. He's a good God. And so if he tells us to do something, it's because there is a good benefit that comes to us if we do it. And I love living in 2026 because science is finally catching up. That what the Bible said thousands of years ago that we should do, science is catching up with it. Psychology is catching up with it. Medicine is catching up with it. Archaeology, all of it. So we should just take him literally and do what he says because it's for our benefit. So I'm going to get into that in part 3, which again, I will start at 8 o'clock. If you want to come with me, I'll be live again on X, Rumble, and Instagram. I will see you there.